My name is Madelyn. I'm a software engineer at Pinterest. Let's break in.
This is Ruben Harris. I'm here with the homies Artur and Timur Meyster, and this is the Breaking Stars podcast. Timur, can you please tell the people what we're doing today?
Yeah, so it's 8 a.m. on a Friday morning, and today we're recording out of Pinterest. Even though it's early, we actually live right behind the Pinterest building. That's where we live, and that's where we work. That's where the Career Karma headquarters is based out of. And today we have a very special guest, really cool story, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. Ruben, can you please introduce the guest?
Yeah, we're here with the force within the Latinx community, representing the Dominican Republic. Her name is Maddie Tavares, who is an Android engineer at Pinterest. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about her upbringing. We're going to talk about mentorship and how she learned how to code. But before going into all of that and the work that she's done in the community, let's just say welcome, Maddie.
Hi, guys. I'm really excited to be here today.
Welcome.
We are really excited to be here with you, too. And, Pinterest is a huge company. And so can you talk to the people and explain, like, what Pinterest is for the people that don't know, and then what an engineer does on the Pinterest team?
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So Pinterest, I think our tagline is like a place for you to discover and do what you love. Mm-hmm. So some people think of us as like a bookmarking tool or a discovery tool. So basically you can come on Pinterest and find ideas for anything in your life. So let's say you want to plan a party or a wedding or something. You can see how millions of other people have done it, and then you can build a mood board where you can kind of bring your idea to life and like have some examples of what you're trying to do. If you're an artist, you might come here to Pinterest to get some inspiration on our app, to find different images that like inspire you to create something new. A lot of people also use Pinterest for their lesson plans, for like coming up with new lesson plans for teaching. So a lot of teachers use Pinterest to like find ideas for their students and new things to work on in class. Yeah, no,
there's a lot of use cases. I definitely use Pinterest boards to organize a lot of things, including like crazy ideas like underground tunnels on your house or like clothing outfits and things like that. And so, are you the person that helps like with searching and like stuff like that to make all this work, or how does how are these boards created on the engineering side?
Yeah, so I actually don't work on search exactly. I've worked on a lot of different parts of the app while I've been here. Search is not one of them. We have like a dedicated search team. So we actually have like a back-end team that works on all of the search stuff. So I work on the Android side. So anything that you see when you open up our Android app, or anything that you see maybe when you open up our iOS app, just all the visual stuff on there, the front-end stuff. There are other teams that work on like making search possible. So once you actually put in a search query into like the search bar and you press the enter button, we send that information over to our backend team or like our backend code, and they will go ahead and figure out where that information that you're looking for lives, and they'll figure out what to return to you.
Yeah. Awesome. And since we live near Pinterest, there's literally like 3 buildings around us. For a lot of consumers of apps like Pinterest, Instagram, I don't think people realize the scale of how big these companies are and how many people work here. Can you just kind of describe like the size of the company and what other roles are there besides engineering?
Yeah. So people are really surprised when I tell them how big Pinterest is, because it's just an app or a website, right? Yeah. So I think currently we have like 1,700 people working with us. I could be more because we also have contractors. But we have a team of 600 engineers, which is what really surprises people. They're like, what are they doing? But we built a lot of our own internal tools that we use. So there are a lot of people just working on tools that engineers use to build the app. And we have cloud engineers, we have client-side engineers, back-end engineers, and we have a ton of machine learning engineers. So there are all these departments. I don't even know all of them. I know like the ones I've worked with before and the ones that are mentioned all of the time. But yeah, so we have all of these teams, and they serve a very specific like purpose, and we're like really grateful that we get to have all of these people here, because everybody gets to focus on what they're good at.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of roles like sales departments, and business, and data, and stuff like that. Marketing,
product management,
and something else that's interesting about Pinterest is that you all also have apprenticeships. So a lot of the listeners of the podcast are learning how to code or trying to break into tech, but they don't know which companies are offering internships or apprenticeships. Can you talk about the apprenticeship at Pinterest, since you were an apprentice here, and like what the difference is between an internship and an apprenticeship?
Yeah. Cool. So the apprenticeship program is really interesting. So it's actually a program for people from non-traditional tech backgrounds.
Okay.
It was kind of started by this woman. Her name is Abby Maldonado. She's still with the company. She was kind of the visionary for the program, and she wanted to find pathways for people who didn't have a CS degree or who were returning to the workforce, people like mothers, for them to find a way into tech. So she created the program, and I was part of the first class. So we were the guinea pigs. They were trying to figure out whether it was going to work, and if it did work, how was it going to work? And honestly, it's been awesome for the company because they get like amazing, talented people that they wouldn't have found otherwise. Just through this program. It's a huge pipeline. So when I started the program, it was actually just 3 of us, and we were all from New York.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was really, really cool. It was a really cool opportunity. It was really unique. There weren't that many apprenticeship programs in Silicon Valley or in tech at all. Like a lot of people have actually taken our model and transformed it to make it work for their company. So now like a lot of companies have them, like LinkedIn, Spotify, Twilio has one, Lyft has one, Airbnb I think is working on one or already has one. So a lot of people have these apprenticeship programs, and now we actually have a class of 10 people that just came in.
That's amazing. So imitation is the best form of flattery. And I think that you mentioned Maldonado is Abby Latina too?
She's half Latina, yes.
Okay, Latina gang out here representing big. And you mentioned like New York, and so like, can you talk a little bit about your upbringing? I think you're born in Washington Heights. Can you describe Washington Heights for the people that don't know what the environment is like in Washington Heights, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about how you got interested in breaking into tech?
Yeah, cool. So Washington Heights. Washington Heights is a predominantly Dominican neighborhood. A lot of people don't speak English there because you can just speak Spanish and get by. It's like little Dominican Republic. I like to say, if you can think of like Little Italy as like, So Washington Heights is like that kind of place. I grew up in a single parent household. So my mom was a single mother. She worked all the time. So she'd get home around 9, and then we have like a quick dinner and go to bed. I think so. Washington Heights isn't like a lot of places that most people know. A lot of people there don't have college degrees. So there is like kind of a lack of role models there for young kids to look up to. There are more opportunities because the mayors have started to really invest in that neighborhood, and now even a tech program is launching. Oh wow. But so
it's all good. So like,
and
speaking of role models,
and speaking of New York, Artur and I grew up in Queens. We grew up in Jackson Heights, which is a very predominantly immigrant part of town. So you have people from Dominican Republic, Ukraine, from
India,
Colombia, India, all kinds of nationalities. And I think to your point, out there, people are just like struggling to survive. They work for industries like maybe in Manhattan. So in the night, a lot of people who cannot afford to live in Manhattan, they'll find cheaper places to live in other boroughs or in other parts of the city. So it tends to be that a lot of the service workers tend to work in the city, but then they tend to live out there. So as a kid, there's probably not a lot of role models. So what did you figure out, or how did you figure out like where you wanted to go to college or what you wanted to do in life?
So like who were the role models for that neighborhood?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think the role models for our neighborhoods were like, one, celebrities and like, you know, baseball players and actresses. But the other set of role models that were really close to home were like teachers, right?
Yeah.
So teachers were like kind of who you could look up to and who you could ask questions about college and like their life outside of Washington Heights and what they had experienced and like why they chose to become a teacher. And like actually teachers were really good references because you could also ask them what their siblings were up to and like kind of get more ideas of what to do with your life from like knowing that if you like really took the time out to get to know your teachers. So I didn't really know that I wanted to go to college till like my junior year of high school. So I took the pre-SAT. I did really well on it. I think the teachers get the scores first. So one day, like my teachers were all like freaking out, like, oh my God, you have to go to college. And I didn't know why, but like my class knew why. So when I walked into class, everybody was like, oh, Maddie's going to college, even though I hadn't like applied and I hadn't thought about it. But then my teacher like announced like, oh, she scored very well on the pre-SAT and like we're going to help her like go to college. So I didn't apply to that many schools. I didn't have like a real dream school or anything. I kind of applied to the schools my teachers told me to apply to, and 4 of those were like SUNY, State University of New York, public schools, and 3 of them were like the top ones at the time. And I took the SAT. I had the highest score in my class. Wow. And that was really awesome because it just opened up the door like to opportunities that I never knew about or like even considered. And so I got into Binghamton, which at the time was the #1 public school in the SUNY school system.
Awesome.
And I thought I wanted to go to another school, but my teachers were like, no, you have to go to like Binghamton. Like that's the school for you. You're going to meet like amazing people there. And you're going to have so many opportunities afterwards. So that's kind of how my path went. I just went ahead and went to Binghamton.
How did you go about choosing your major?
Okay, this is interesting. Most people are like, what? When I tell them this, they're kind of surprised. But so I went to Binghamton and I took a few general education courses. Economics was one of them. I hadn't really thought about majoring in economics. I was like, oh, this class is fun. I really like problem solving. I'm not like huge on math, but I like problem solving. Like I really like just making a plan for solving a problem. So I really enjoyed economics, but I didn't consider majoring in that at all before my financial aid counselor was like, hey, you need to pick a major if you want to like keep your financial aid. And I was like, oh, okay, it's that time already, but I don't know what I want to do with my life. Like I have no idea. But then I went online and I just searched like which majors offer you the most choices, like give you the most career choices, and which ones are also well paid because like I couldn't depend on my mom at all or my dad. Like I had to be making money like right after I graduated was like what I thought. So I just looked up like which ones pay well as well, and like economics was one of them. And I was like, oh, I took an economics class. I did pretty well and I enjoyed it. So economics it is. And I decided to major in economics.
I think that's the way a lot of people select their majors as they're going through things. And, as you were, going through learning economics, getting closer to the end of completing college, you started, exploring different things. And so can you talk a little bit about that exploration period, your travels during that time, what you did in order to be able to save for that, like kind of like your financial situation, because that's a situation that's very real for a lot of people. So can you kind of like unpack that?
Yeah, cool. So I, during my senior year, I decided that I wasn't ready to graduate because I had done a few internships and I was still not sure of what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I actually felt like I didn't have enough world experience to go out into the real world. I felt like I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
So one thing that I really wanted to do was I wanted to learn how people lived and worked and like what they cared about in other parts of the world. And one place that really stuck out to me was Italy, because I had taken an Italian course, and I was like, oh, I can go there and I can speak the language and I can meet people that are like completely different from me, and I love Italian food. So I was like, I'll go to Italy and I have like my eat, pray, love moment. But like at the time, that was kind of unrealistic for me, because I was like $5,000 in debt. On like credit card debt. Actually, I had like already my student loan debt, but I didn't count that as debt. So I was like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I want to make it happen. And I really like, have you guys read The Alchemist?
Oh yeah, Paulo Coelho.
Yeah. So I at the time I had read that book, and I really believed in like the power of my thoughts, and I still do.
Yeah, it's a great book.
So I was like, oh, like I just need to work towards this, and maybe like the universe will help me achieve my goal. And it did. So I just started applying to programs. And as I was applying, I met a man who like offered me a job bartending in New York. And like randomly, I'm like $5,000 in debt. I want to go to Italy. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And this man, like, I just meet this man, and he's like, hey, do you want to be a bartender? Like, I'll give you a job at like this really cool place in Manhattan, like downtown Manhattan, that got a lot of traffic. And I was like, yeah, like, are you my fairy godmother or something? And I think even at the time, I didn't know what an opportunity this was, right? Like, I had to go, I was still at Binghamton, so I would have to travel, like, Monday to Thursday, I would be at Binghamton, and that was, like, 4 hours from the city. And then I would take a bus Thursday to Sunday to be in the city, and then I would go back up Sunday night. So, I, like, at the time, I was like, I know I can make this work because it's a weekend job, but I didn't know, like, I had no formal training as a bartender. You need a certificate in New York to like be a bartender, but he was like,
Were
no.
you 21?
Yeah, I was 21 already. Yeah.
And they taught you the game.
Yeah, so he was like, yeah, just come in, I'll train you. Like, I'll have everyone else train you. It's cool. And I didn't understand why he was doing this for me. I didn't ask him for a job. He just offered it to me. But that job allowed me to like save so much money. I saved like $20,000 for my trip.
That's amazing.
In like 4 or 5 months or so, like 4.5 months.
That's huge. And before going into Italy and just talking about like your world travel, I know you said you were born in Washington Heights, but you also lived in the Dominican Republic as well, right?
Yeah.
So can you kind of describe, the Dominican Republic and then like the contrast to Italy before, you how like that experience?
Okay. So the contrast between the Dominican Republic and Italy. Wow. All right. So in the Dominican Republic, like, we had a house that it wasn't a nice house at all. It was in a random village, the random village that my mom grew up in. And we played outside. We played in the mud when it was raining. There were a lot of kids around. There weren't like any modern stores. We had like house stores where you'd go to a place that looked like a house and you'd buy bread in the morning and like butter. And actually, we didn't even have fresh water in the village. So there would be a truck that would pass by every morning. And I think it's still like this to this day, because we actually don't have like running water in the house. But a truck would pass by every morning with plantains, which Dominicans are known for, plátanos. And they would pass by with water, so they could fill up a tank for you, or like a big jug or something, so you could cook and wash yourself and do all these things. And then they'd also have fruit and stuff. So every morning we'd wait for the truck to come so we could eat and so we could shower and like cook. And I think for me, the Dominican Republic was a lot of fun as a kid, because there were kids everywhere and there was freedom. Like, I didn't have to ask anyone for permission to go anywhere. We had like tamarindo trees, tamarind trees. And it was fun. And then going to Washington Heights, I was really sad because I got there and it was like, I remember it was a really rainy day when I moved back. And I just looked around and there were all these like concrete like buildings, and it was gray. And I was like, no, take me back.
What was it? And then was it gray in Italy?
No, actually. I mean, Italy was completely different.
Did you feel like you found like kind of that eat, pray, love moment? Did you feel like you kind of found yourself in Italy?
Well, not in Italy, but I'm really glad that I spent a lot of time in Italy. Like, I loved it. The people were amazing. It was a really beautiful country, and I was really exposed to a lot of different people that I hadn't been exposed to before through the program that I was doing, actually. So while I was there, I took a video production course, like a broadcast journalism course, and then I took a mindfulness course, and that's kind of how I became vegetarian and all this stuff.
Interesting.
But it also made me more introspective.
I think you also did teaching over there, right?
Yeah. So I also taught like kids English.
Okay.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
So
Really cool.
fast forward, so you're in Italy now, and you're still in college, and then something happens after that sparks your interest in coding. Can you unpack that moment for us?
Yeah. So what happened was after Italy, I didn't want to leave Europe because I felt like I wasn't done. Like my time wasn't done. I hadn't really found myself. So I still wanted to go somewhere where I felt like everyone was completely different from me. And actually, the universe, again, gave me that. So I went to Istanbul, and I met some people there, and I decided to spend some time there.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I met two girls, the first two women that I had ever met, actually, that were computer engineering majors or computer science majors. I don't remember exactly what their major was, but I remember they were just like, yeah, we're computer engineers, and they were like beautiful, and they were like friendly and very outgoing, and I was like, oh, what is it that you do? Like, I just got curious about what they were doing, and I knew then, like, I asked a few questions, and I knew that they were coding.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I was seeing a ton of ads for like computer science, like learn to code. Everywhere that I went online, it was like, learn to code. I think there were a lot of like Code Academy ads at the time, and maybe like General Assembly. And then I just kind of became interested. Again, back to The Alchemist, I felt like they were like omens on my way.
Yeah.
And my friend at the time had a business, and he was like, maybe you should build me a website because you're always on your computer and you're like really good at computers. And so for context, like a lot of my friends there, they only use their computer for playing music. They didn't really use it to access like the web. They only use their mobile phones. So the fact that I was always on my computer to him was like really impressive. He's like, oh, you can do cool stuff. Like, you're one of those people. And he's like, you should build me a website. And I was like, I mean, I'm on my computer all the time, but I can't really do that. But at the same time, I was like, but if I wanted to, like, could I figure it out?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you meet these women. They don't look like engineers. They're outgoing, but in addition to that, they know how to code. And it sounds like that was the aha moment for you. Can you take us back and kind of describe how you felt? Did you know what you were going to do next? And what did you end up doing next?
Yeah. So like you said, I was really surprised by them being engineers because they didn't look or speak or act like what I thought an engineer would speak or act or look like, right? Based off of the media and what we see in the media.
Yeah.
So when I met them, I was really shocked and I got really interested. I was like, oh, maybe I could do what they're doing. I don't know. So once my friend asked me to build a website for him, I was like, oh, like, how would I go about doing this? And then I remembered all of the advertisements that I had already seen for learn how to code. Now that I knew, like, oh, they're coding, this is what they're doing. All right, cool, let me try it. So I went on Code Academy and I just signed up, and one of their first tracks was like HTML and CSS. And I just started doing it right away. And right when I started doing it, I made the connection between Code Academy and coding HTML and CSS and MySpace.
Interesting. We love MySpace.
Yeah, I loved MySpace too. Like, I spent a lot of time on MySpace, and not even just connecting with people, but trying to make my profile the best profile. Like, if any new tool came out, any new widget, it had to be on my profile. Like, so I had like a pretty decked out profile. I spent a lot of time on it, and like I thought it was fun to do that kind of work. So I was like, oh, this is what I used to do like all the time. coding. Oh, cool. Wow. Like people have careers, like people made careers out of this.
Yeah.
So what actually happened with me was when Facebook came out,
Yeah.
I was looking up how to customize my Facebook like I had done on MySpace. And because I really wanted to do that, like I wanted to continue doing it.
Yeah.
But I didn't like find that, obviously, because that's not an option.
Yeah.
And I kind of forgot about coding after that, like about customizing things and creating things. So when I made that connection, I was like, okay, like it seems like I can make a career out of this, and there are other programming languages and there are other things I can create. So I can create like MySpace pages, but it looks like I can also create apps and like different things that people can use.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, this is like, I've always loved like playing with techie things, and now I can like create these techie things if I gain these skills. Yeah.
And then you ended up going back to New York and like just doing the traditional route, or what happened after that?
Yeah. So I went back to New York because I still hadn't finished my actual economics degree. I was missing one class, labor economics.
Okay.
I had put it off long enough, but it was actually my favorite class.
Yeah. Is that like workforce development stuff?
It's more like, how do you compensate people? How do you motivate people? Stuff like that.
Got it.
So that it's fair and that people are like wanting to work for you.
Yeah. We could unpack that later. That's important.
Yeah. So that class was a lot of fun. But while I was taking that class, I started taking other coding classes online. So I went on Udemy. I found the most popular teacher with the most ratings, and I just signed up for his course. There was like a discount code, so it was like $10.
Yeah.
Nice.
We know about those codes.
Yeah. I mean, they're always there, right?
Yeah.
I don't
That's
think
so
people
funny
know
that you say this. We have a lot of people in our community who are like, yeah, like I'm taking this Udemy course. They told me initially that I was it's a discount and it expires in like a week, but it's still there.
Yeah.
But those courses are great, and
Great
I remember
courses.
I was taking those courses too. So people who are listening, definitely
I mean,
check out Udemy.
for $10, you could literally teach yourself web development, right?
Yeah. So
That's
I think the
amazing.
Udemy courses are really valuable because like you can go on YouTube and like learn to code, but like the Udemy courses are all like packaged.
Yeah.
Like it's a package, like from beginning to end. What do you need to download? What tools do you need? Like where do you start? And like it progresses.
Yeah.
So if you find a really popular teacher, you'll probably find like a really good course that will teach you what you need to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went back to finish my economics degree. There was no way I wasn't going to finish when I had like a class left, a semester left. So I went back and I finished it at the same time I was doing this stuff online, just like dabbling in it, not really super committed, just like, oh, I think I want to do this. We'll see how it goes. But I had this degree and like other things that I was also interested in. So when I graduated, I applied to some different jobs. And one of the jobs that I actually ended up taking was in public relations.
Okay.
And that job was awesome because it taught me a lot about like efficiency.
Yeah.
It really solidified the fact that I wanted to be in tech and in a fast moving industry that was like forward thinking.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the work that I was doing there, I felt, especially when I started learning how to code after that, I was like, there's a robot that could do this. Like there's a machine or like some script somewhere that can do this work. Why am I wasting hours of my life doing this work?
Yeah.
Like I was really upset. It was like,
can you give us an example of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So in the public relations and marketing world, a lot of how they make money and how they track their progress is by tracking impressions.
Yeah.
So just tracking like how many mentions you got online. So on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, on websites. So every day you're like checking who mentioned that product or company. Yeah.
By hand, you actually like
By
go into the search, Google it, or
Interesting.
Yeah. So every day I was like on Google, seeing the latest news and like the latest mentions. I had like Google alerts set up, and like a lot of people didn't even have Google alerts set up, so they were going in every morning and checking. And then we had to like, we would run campaigns, and every campaign we'd have to go through every tweet, see how many people retweeted that tweet.
Interesting. Manually.
Manually. It was
wild.
like, it was so bad. But I think like I needed that job on my journey because it really taught me like you can't have this kind you can't have these kinds of jobs, like you're gonna be miserable. And like and by that point I knew better. Like I knew enough to know that like I shouldn't, no human should be doing like this mind-numbing work. And so like while I was there, I was also applying to the fellowship programs. So I applied to 2, I think, Flatiron.
And what do you mean by fellowship programs? Like boot camps?
Yeah. So kind of like a boot camp. My program, let's say, was 10 months long. It was nights and weekends. And they provided me with everything that I needed. I didn't have to pay for anything. They provided me with a laptop, phone. Yeah.
And what is it called?
Coalition for Queens. Access code.
Shout out to Juke, right?
Yeah, Juke is awesome. He's like an amazing human being. And he created this program. Actually, people might know it by a different name. I'm not allowed to say, but there's a different, they're rebranding. But anyway, look up Coalition for Queens. Yeah.
And so you were considering doing a coding bootcamp. Let's just unpack that a little bit. Like, I guess
why did you consider
why did you consider it? Because you were already learning online as well. You took a few courses. Like, what was the motivation for actually doing a boot camp?
So I think the main motivation was like I wanted to become a software engineer as quickly as possible. So I was like, okay, like how am I going to get from point A where I am now to B like quickly? And the other thing is I didn't really have a clear path that I was following to becoming a software engineer. I was just kind of learning things as I went, but I didn't know what skills I actually needed, what people were looking for, how I could become like a full-blown software engineer. So I wanted that guidance, and I wanted like people that I could turn to when I got stuck, because there were times I would get stuck and I'd go online to the forums and you can find the answers, but like really deeply understanding why the thing you did is wrong was where I got stuck and like where I wanted to improve. So I started looking into boot camps and fellowships because they could provide that space for me, right? And they could provide me with like the things that I needed to get from point A to point B quickly.
So tell us more about, so you picked one, tell us why you picked Coalition for Queens and what was the format of the program?
Okay. So Coalition for Queens, honestly, I remember I wasn't really excited about Coalition for Queens because it was a 10-month program. And all the other boot camps were like 3 months to 6 months. Maybe 6 months was like a lot. It was like 3 to 4 months. So I was like, wow, 10 months is going to take me that long. And it's part-time. Like if I did it full-time, I could just like dive in there and like get it done. But like I remember I received a call from Coalition for Queens to interview, and I went, and still I wasn't like completely sold. Because of the 10 months. I was like, that's a long time. That's like another year. But I kept going with it. So the format for like interviewing is you have to fill out an application and then they'll call you in. And if they call you in, you come in for like a workshop where they teach you like HTML and CSS and you build a website and some JavaScript and you build a website. But they're really trying to see like how you work with other people. So there are a bunch of people there. And then you have like a logic kind of test question, and they ask you what you've learned already on your own, how much you know, and like what your approach to learning is, because they want to make sure that you're like, you know, you're like committed to learning and teaching yourself, because there's a lot of that going on there, and that you're really like you really take initiative. So that was the interview process. And then once you get there, so what I did was I would wake up at 6 a.m. and I would go to work, and then I would get to work around 8. I would stay there till like 5, and then the C4Q program would start at 7. So then I would go to Queens and start my program for 3 hours from 7 to 10. And then we had homework and stuff that we would do. And then I'd get home around like 12:30. And then I do it again the next day. And then on the weekends, we had full days of classes. So I think the most valuable thing with Coalition for Queens is that they give you like this curriculum for you to follow. So we have like a private GitHub and like all the lessons are there and like everything that you have to do is there. We lost our teacher kind of like in the second, like 12 weeks in, I think. She's really awesome and she became a mentor to me, but she had to finish her CS degree herself. So she went back to school. And we didn't have a teacher, but we had a curriculum, right? So like all we needed was the space, the tools, and like the curriculum. We knew what we had to, and each other, right? Like we could just ask each other questions and study together. So that was kind of like the setup.
So you guys basically did like peer learning by doing it at the same time, sharing challenges, helping each other out, and that's how you got through the program.
Yeah.
I think you were also like teaching as well at the time, which goes back to the education thing that you kind of like were exposed to early on that also helped solidify the knowledge that you were getting. So can you kind of unpack what you were doing at the same time for kids?
Yeah. So a few months into the program, this lady came in and she was looking for people to teach.
Yeah.
And I referred her to a few other people who I thought knew way more than me because, as you know, in boot camps and like these kinds of programs, there's always someone that's been doing it for like way longer than you, and they're just like finally formalizing their education.
Yeah.
So I referred her to a few people, and then she was like, a few weeks later, she's like, why don't you just sign up? Like, why can't you do it? Yeah. And I was like, oh, I had never thought of it. And she's like, yeah, come interview. Like, I'm sure you'll get it. So I like interviewed for it. And it was basically to help her with her program, which is called Co-Speak Labs. And what they do is they go into classes and they teach into schools, like charter schools and private schools in New York, primarily around Chinatown area. And they teach kids JavaScript, HTML and CSS starting, and then JavaScript, and then they go into like robotics and stuff. And it was really a really cool opportunity. Yeah. Because like I felt like I knew my stuff, but when you have to teach it to someone, you really have to know your stuff. So you have to figure out how to explain it to someone. And so like I think teaching solidified my experience and like my education and what I knew. And it also helped me become a better engineer and better communicator.
And were you doing this on top of your day job, or at that point did you already quit your job and were you doing engineering full time?
Yeah. So by that point I had quit my job. Like when she gave me this opportunity, I quit my job because I was like, oh, I can make enough.
Yeah. And that was the beginning of your community work, which we'll talk about later. But, you know, after you're done with these different programs, you go into like a job search process. What was that like for you? Did you like choose certain companies that you wanted to work for? Did you attend certain events, or like how did that go?
Yeah. So I started my job search before I graduated from my boot camp or my fellowship program. So I think it was like September. So I was 6 months into my program and I went to a tech job fair and I was really interested in like, actually it started before that. So first I'll talk about the time that I tried to get an internship at Venmo, which didn't really work out. My first application ever that I ever sent was to Venmo. I really wanted to work for them. I was using their tool and like I thought it would be a great first internship. It wasn't for people that were doing boot camps, but I applied anyway. Why not? But they actually like considered my application. They sent me a coding challenge and I really wanted to prove that I knew my stuff. So I submitted the coding challenge, and although I could have used different libraries to like parse data and for networking, I like built the networking layer myself and like did all of the parsing manually. And so like I just wanted to prove to them that I knew how to code. I felt like there might be like some prejudices against me because I didn't have a CS degree. So I was like, oh, I just really want to show them. And then I submitted it and I got declined. Like they were like, oh, no, it's not going to work out, whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm going to ask for feedback. Like I really need feedback because it's my first time. And I emailed them and I was like, hey, like I really want to hopefully reapply in the future. Can you please like tell me what went wrong and like how I can improve and be a stronger applicant next time? And they were like, yeah, cool, we'll give you feedback. Just give us like a week. And they got some feedback. I got some feedback. And the feedback was that I did everything manually that I could have done with a library that was like, you know, tried and tested technology that people all over the world were using already. Like, why would I build it myself when there was technology that could already do it?
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit, because I mean, was it an instinct for you to just ask for feedback, or were you guided to ask for feedback? And then the other thing is, like, I think it's interesting because, like, logically, you know, I think you followed the right logic that a lot of people do. Like, I know on the GMAT even, like, you have to, like, write out your math problems to prove that you don't need a calculator and stuff like that. So you technically were showing that you knew what you were doing, but, like, were these things instincts that you were taught by someone? I know the manual thing was, but was the asking for feedback an instinct, or were you taught that?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think it was an instinct. I think I learned that somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I think for a lot of people, it's kind of weird to ask for feedback. I still like see people like get declined from jobs or have their applications declined, and they don't know why, and they never ask. And I'm like, go ask. Like, you should know why you're not a strong applicant. It can be something that you never even thought of. Yeah. Like, that was the case for me. I think someone had mentioned asking for feedback, not for this specific internship, but sometime in my life. Yeah. And then now I just always ask for feedback.
And I think a lot of the time when you go into an interview, you can kind of predict how the outcome will play out. And I think you did all the right things by trying to prove to them that you could do it manually. I think the fact that they rejected you probably shows that the interviewing process is not perfect. Yep. Like, it's other human beings who might have a year or two, maybe a little longer of experience grading it, and it's very biased too. So people who do get rejected, just like keep going like you did, because there's thousands of companies out there and you'll find your right one, which happened to you. So what did you do next, and how did you approach the next company you interviewed with?
Yeah, so actually it's funny that you mentioned that it's flawed. The process is flawed because I was like, I do know about those libraries. Like, if I knew you wanted me to use them, I would have used them. Like,
but I think when I was interviewing for jobs, like, certain companies would expect you to build things from scratch, and they would actually penalize you for using libraries. Yep. And there are other companies that would expect you to use libraries and not build things from scratch. So I think since there's a huge variety of interview processes that are biased, it's always good to ask questions. When you receive a challenge or you are going on to an on-site interview, you should ask the recruiter, like, what do I need to know about this? Who am I going to be meeting with? Do I need to bring my own laptop? How long is the pairing session? Just kind of try to find out as much information ahead of time, so then they can't kind of turn around and tell you, oh, like, we expect you to know to use this, when in reality, like, the instructions didn't say it, right?
Yeah. I always tell people that too. Like, just ask what's going to be on the interview, like what you should know. I always ask, and usually they'll send me like a one sheet summary of like what's going to be there, or at least like some topics that I should definitely know about. So those are really helpful. I think you should always ask. Sorry, what was your other question?
The question was, what did you do next, and how did you approach your other interview?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so for the next one, I went to a job fair, and I met this company. They sounded really cool. They had like this formal apprenticeship program. It was like a contract to hire program. And they seemed like really invested in like the growth of their employees. So, and it was paid, which was really awesome.
Nice.
Like,
always awesome.
Yeah. So the one thing that wasn't so great was that it was in Boston, and I was really set on living in New York. Yeah. And it was in the winter. So
wow.
Yeah. And
but you gotta make sacrifices.
Yeah. Actually, I
still have love for Boston though.
Boston is great, you know. Maybe in the summer. There's really good food there.
A lot of Dominicans.
Yeah, a lot of Dominicans. But yeah, so that night, so I went to the job fair, and then I was like, oh, this company seems really cool. So that night I went online and I applied, and I like wrote my cover letter, and like, you know, I couldn't believe it. So many people from my class were there, but nobody applied. And they were all excited about the opportunity. And I just like went home and applied right away. I was like, no, they're going to get there first. Like, I need to apply. Like, I need to be considered, because I thought everybody else was going to apply, but I was the only one that actually ended up going there.
Action.
Yeah. So I think people should just jump on opportunities when they come along. Like, don't wait. I've actually seen that happen with the Pinterest program, like the apprenticeship program. I'll send people an application. I'm like, dude, the application opened up, apply, and they wait like a week. And by that, then the program, like the application is closed because we had way too many people apply, right? Yeah. So like, they're like, oh, it's closed. I'm like, because like everybody else jumped on it, and you were like waiting to be ready. Like, I don't think people should wait to be ready. They should just do the thing. Yeah.
So you got the opportunity in Boston.
Yeah. So I got the opportunity in Boston. It was really amazing. But before I left my program in December, I learned about Pinterest. I learned that they were starting this apprenticeship program. I didn't know much. It wasn't on their website. Like, it was kind of like word of mouth. The person who started it, Abby Maldonado, she had met Juke.
Okay.
at like a networking thing.
Awesome.
And she was just like, hey, do you know anyone? And he's like, yeah, I know plenty of people. Like I have a program that like prepares people for these opportunities.
Yeah.
And then he forwarded the opportunity to us. And when I heard about that opportunity, I was like, this is for me.
Yeah.
Like I knew it was for me.
Yeah, you can feel it in
yeah,
your gut. It's like
you
the
know,
universe was telling you that.
Yeah, like I just knew it was for me. And like I was like, I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know how many people are applying, but I know that I'm going to get this because like I loved Pinterest. I had used it for so long. Yeah. And like the timing, I don't know. I just felt like I was going to get it. Yeah. But I didn't hear from them until February.
Oh, wow.
And like the program that I accepted in Boston, some people told me to turn it down because it was like 3 months to hire and like nothing was for certain, right? Yeah. But I was like, yeah, I think I'll get it. I think I'll be fine. And even if I don't get it, I think Pinterest will contact me by then. Yeah. And like it just kind of felt like gut. Yeah. And the crazy part is I was like, I told someone, I was like, I don't think Pinterest will be ready before April. Because it just seems like they haven't gotten everything together. They haven't contacted me. I sent them my cover letter. Like, I don't know. Something just told me, take this opportunity.
In the meantime.
Yeah, in the meantime. Yeah. And I went to Boston and I learned so much. Yeah. And I think like 6 to 8 weeks into Boston, Pinterest called me.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, what? This is crazy. Like, okay. Like, I knew it was going to happen.
What are the things that you learned at the Boston internship that prepared you for the Pinterest internship that you would not have had if you didn't do it?
Yeah. Let's see. I didn't know how to navigate a code base before I went to Boston. I didn't know really about proper code formatting and like how to structure things, proper like project architecture. I didn't know. I think there were a lot of things I didn't know. The things that helped me specifically were like we were working with this thing called Recycler View, which is just like a list view, and like before this program, I didn't really have to work with it that much. Yeah. But in the program, I built like a Recycler View like 3 times for different types of like displaying different types of data.
Awesome.
And when I came to Pinterest, the interview, I had to build a Recycler View.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So by that point, and then I had to like, input some data that came from like a model that they had already created. Yeah. And by that time, like I was a pro. Like they were like, oh, you can use Google, and I was like, oh, no, I don't need to. Like I got this. Like I just did this 3 times. Flex. Yeah. So I kind of feel like everything worked out the way that it should have, because if I hadn't gone there, I think I would have struggled a bit more during that interview. Yeah. But because I already had those skills, it was like it was so easy. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, and a lot of people who struggle to get jobs, they think that their first job needs to be like a full-time like 9 to 5 like 12-month contract or 12-month like salary, but you can actually make it easier for the employer by even proposing to do a contract to hire, because then it gives the employer the flexibility to evaluate you, and it gives you the ability to also evaluate the employer. So it looks like it turned out well in your case.
Yeah.
And then like I think the other thing that's important to touch on is that apprenticeships or internships aren't for sure that you're going to be full time.
Yep.
So like, what was it like during the apprenticeship? Were you nervous that you weren't going to get the full time, or were you confident, just as confident that you were going to get the apprenticeship, that you were going to get the full time? And either one, like you still have to do things in order to get that. So how did you prepare for getting the full time offer?
Yeah, I think so when I accepted the Pinterest offer, I had 2 other offers. So I had an offer from the Intrepid Pursuit, and I had an offer from Handy. Do you know Handy?
Yeah, I know Handy
in New York?
Yeah, in New York. Yeah.
So
back to the roots.
Yeah. So I really wanted to work in New York, and like the Boston company said I could work from their small New York office, and then Handy was in New York.
Okay.
And then, so then I got the Pinterest offer, and it was like, oh, these 2 things are for sure. Yeah. Like, full-time salaried employment. Yeah. Or I could go to Pinterest and take a chance. And I had actually heard one person speak, Tracy Chow. She was an engineer here, and she was very
she's very vocal about like diversity and things like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I saw her speak at Harvard while I was at Boston.
Oh, wow.
And she said that like the program was like the apprenticeship program, something they were trying. They didn't know if it was going to work. It was kind of like a trial. And I was like, oh, I'm the guinea pig. So, and by that time I had already gotten the offer. I saw her like the Saturday that I received the offer or something. And I was like, okay, like this isn't for sure, but I'm going to go to Pinterest. Like I have to go. Yeah, I have to go to Pinterest. Actually, my mom was the person that really like pushed me to accept the offer, because I was like, yeah, she was like super supportive. I had those other 2 offers, and I was like, Ma, like these are like good paying jobs, like I can be close to you, blah, blah. And she's like, no, like you can't stay here. She was like, you have to go, because I remember how excited you were when you got the interview.
I'll say even just throughout the whole conversation, your energy is up the entire time. You're still super excited, which is dope.
And when it comes to, it's funny that you bring up your mom throughout this whole process. What was mom like? What was she telling you all along?
Yeah, my mom has always been like super supportive. She's awesome. She never knows what I'm up to, but she really trusts that I'm doing the right thing.
I think all of our parents, they're kind of like confused what we do for tech.
Yeah. I mean, even last year, I think my mom thought I was working for JP Morgan. She like told me, and I was like, no, Ma, like you have to come see where I work. Like it's so cool. Yeah. But yeah, she's never really known. Like I kind of just told her like, oh yeah, I'm going to major in economics. Yeah, sounds good. Have you had anything to eat today? Like, have you drank do you have enough water? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, my mom was the same way.
She sends us packages of food still.
Oh, that's really nice. She sends my brother food. But yeah, and then when I told her, like, I had graduated and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn to code and, like, do this thing. She didn't know what code was. She knew it was something on the computer, and I had always spent a lot of time on the computer. So she was like, okay, I'll just, like, you can live here and, like, I'll support you and cool, like, go for it. She didn't know what I was doing. Like, she just knew that I was out of the house all the time and I was working really hard. And at times she was worried about me. She's like, are you eating?
So at this point, you've gone so far. You got the apprenticeship. You're going through it. Can you share what you did to actually turn that apprenticeship into a full-time offer?
Yeah. So we actually have like a template for conversion from apprenticeship to full-time. Okay. So you're assigned a mentor who's like there for your day-to-day, like help guide you and like maybe ask you to join her projects. And then you have a manager whose really purpose is to make sure that you're on track to convert by 1 year. So it's a 1-year apprenticeship program. And there are multiple times when you can convert throughout the apprenticeship, but you have to like make sure you demonstrate certain things to this board, unbiased like board of people who will review your work and decide whether you get hired full time. Yeah. So basically like you kind of know coming in what you have to do and like how long it will take you to get converted. One thing I will say is like being an apprentice was really hard because like I said, nothing is for sure. So you're like constantly working to prove yourself to others and to yourself. And like it's really tough, especially when you're the only person. Like in the beginning, I was like one of 3 people who were part of this program who had this like very non-traditional tech background while everyone else had a CS degree. And then on top of that, I like don't look like anyone else. Like out of all the engineers, I was like the only Latina that anyone that I knew of. So like for so long, I was like the only one. And that was really hard because I felt really different. Like I'm a woman, I'm Latina, and I come from a non-traditional tech background. Like I'm so different. And like I felt different and I felt like there were some disadvantages, but little did I know, most people didn't know that I was an apprentice.
No, that's amazing. And I think it's interesting to bring up things that we didn't know, because coming into Pinterest, Nana and Sydney from 8 Heroes that do the video, they were talking about how you're a celebrity, essentially. Like you doing all this work in the community. We were on stage with Eva Longoria doing things with like Te No Lo Chicas for your community work. So can you talk a little bit about that and your exposure in that world and how your video stuff was able to tie into what you're doing with Univision and in the community? Yeah, so
I think I started getting interested in community work while I was doing Access Code. So our project was like we built an app where people could buy and sell food from their neighbors within like a 2-mile radius. So really we built that app because we were trying to empower people that we knew We didn't end up like investing a lot of time in it. We all went and got our jobs, but we all knew people who sold food from their homes to local businesses, like a mom, a stay-at-home mom or something. So we were like, oh, we can build an app where like people can like actually sell to people and find more customers, and people who want home cooked food can find home cooked food. So that was like the first time where I was like, oh, I can do things for the community with like these skills. And then like I went to Boston and I did a Code for America hackathon, and my project didn't win anything. Like, you know, I did like 2 projects because I was like, oh, I want to learn how to code in Python. So I did 2 projects, and then I actually met someone there who was working on providing resources for human trafficking victims.
Oh, wow.
And he really needed a prototype of his idea of an app for people, for victims and for organizations that wanted to help victims. And so while I was in Boston working at that company, I was also like helping him bring his idea to life. Me and my friend. So that was really cool because like I think we helped him a lot. We made him realize that it like he could bring it into reality, and we built some of it for him, but then he had to move on and find like a formal team. So that was really cool. And then when I got to San Francisco, I started getting involved in like teaching and mentoring. And I think my mentor, her name is Amy Quispe, she realized that like I was into this stuff. So she was like, oh, there's this Tecnologicas campaign, like you should totally sign up. I think you'd be perfect for it. One of the requirements is that you're an engineer or actually an engineer. And the other requirement is that you're Latina and that you speak Spanish and English, because they want to run these national campaigns for families that are primarily immigrants and Spanish speaking. Like my mom wouldn't understand the campaign if it was in English. So I applied and got in, and it was pretty amazing because I had all these cool opportunities to like be on TV and be on stage with Eva Longoria and like meet all these amazing people from like the Televisa Foundation and Univision. But I also got the opportunity to like go around the country and teach young girls how to code. And while that was really rewarding, I think the most rewarding thing was teaching their moms and their parents about the opportunities in tech that they never knew about. Like I would sit on stage and like answer all of their questions and just look out at their faces and you could see how shocked they were. Like they just had no idea about the opportunities that are in tech and like what that can mean for the future of their family, right?
Because I think you said like the average age of salaries was like under 50,000. We don't have the exact stats now, but like to find out that you can go from like, you know, not even going to college and making 6 figures was a very big deal. And I think you even took it to another level, applying to other Latino initiatives to go to other countries around the world that you talked about. I think you just got back from Israel. Like what was you know, that Latino initiative?
So this is another thing that a friend recommended me for. It's called Reality Adelante, and it's a really cool opportunity. They take 50 Latino leaders from around the country, actually from around the world. Most people didn't live in the U.S. And they take them to Israel to expose them to like what's going on in Israel, all of the conflicts in the region, but really to show how Israelis and Jewish people have managed to thrive in a place of conflict, and not just thrive but become like the startup nation. Like they at one point they had more startups than any country in the EU. Right? I didn't know that. Like than many countries combined, right? So I
think companies like Waze came out of Israel.
So it's really cool to be in that space. I learned a lot of things that I want to bring back here about organizational structure and hierarchy and like how people work together. And I also met like really amazing people who are doing amazing work around the world to like help Latinos and Latino families and stuff.
That's really cool.
So you got the job.
So at this point in the podcast, we do the lightning round. And we're recording at Pinterest, and there's conference rooms that are getting booked up. So we're going to do a super quick lightning round. Artur and Ruben, take it away.
So this question takes us back to the basics. If you only had $100 and you had to break into tech and you just moved to a new city, didn't know anyone, how would you spend that $100 to get yourself in tech?
For me, the most important thing would be to have a laptop. So I'd probably buy like a Chromebook or like a used laptop or something. I would 100% need a laptop because that's where I would go to find all of the resources that I need. And then when I'm ready to apply to some jobs, I'll obviously need a laptop to study and practice coding and then to submit things. So for sure, a laptop.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And speaking again about things that you may not have known, Artur and Timur actually like merengue, bachata, and salsa dancers.
Oh, nice.
So I know that's big in Dominican culture. You know, is music something that's, you know, part of, you know, your day-to-day rhythm or routine, or does it help you push through, or how do you think about your routine?
Yeah, I'm very big on Latin music, reggaeton and bachata, and like not so much merengue, but like I love Latin music.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, I don't know, like when I'm feeling different or feeling out of place, if I play Latin music, I just feel so proud and I get energized.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of like how beautiful my culture is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next question, it's about giving advice to either your younger self or your sibling. So to any podcast listener who's tuning in and who's excited, they're inspired by your story, but they maybe are unsure or are trying to figure out what their next step should be, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I feel like I say this to a lot of people, but because it's true, and I really believe that you should just go for it. I really think that like a lot of people are discouraged by computer science and engineering because it's hard. And yeah, like it's difficult in the beginning. If it wasn't difficult, like everyone would do it, right? If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
But it, like the hardest part is like getting started and then getting through that hump in the beginning. And then after that, it's not smooth sailing, but it's kind of smooth sailing compared to like what you had to do to get to that point. Yeah. So for sure, I would say like, just do it. Like just commit to it and go for it. And then the other thing that I would say that has been really important for me is to not compare myself to anyone, like not worry about how much anyone else knows or what their journey looked like, or if they've been coding since they were 8 years old. Like, don't worry about any of that. Just like focus on your journey and like on getting better each and every day. Don't think about anyone else. Don't compare yourself, because if you compare yourself to others, like you will always lose, because there's always someone that has more experience. And more resources. So for sure, I just say like, just dive in and focus, and like just focus on yourself and your growth. Yeah.
And before closing out and sharing how people can stay in touch with you, you mentioned a book in addition to The Alchemist and the Pre-Chat. What was the name of that book? I think it was like The Greatest Salesman. And like, why was it so important to you?
The Greatest Salesman in the World, I was reading that while I was doing my program, and there were times where I felt like I was never going to catch up to everyone that had way more experience than me, where I felt like the journey was going to be long and hard, even though I saw that other people have become engineers in like a year or two. And I read that book, and in the first scroll, it says that like not to worry about how much experience or knowledge other people in your industry have accumulated or in your world have accumulated, because knowledge tends to expire. Yeah. And I think that really hit home for me, especially in tech, because things move so fast. It's like, he could have been coding since he was 8, but like, does that language still exist? Yeah.
That's real
so
though.
Can you build Android apps?
Yeah, like Android didn't exist when that guy was 8. So I think it's just like keeping that in mind, that like, yes, people will have more experience than you, but how much of that experience is like super valuable and will make or break your career? Not a lot of it.
Yeah, awesome. So what's the best way to stay in touch with you?
I'm easy to find on Twitter at Maddie TV. So it's MADDEY TV.
Love it.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thanks again for your time, and without further ado,
let's break in.